So we all know what Zelda is, right? I don't need to explain that? Excellent. But I probably still need to explain Dragalia Lost. It's a mobile gacha game produced by Cygames, the developers of Grand Blue, and published by Nintendo, the developers of at least one game you love. It's a fantasy game with an excellent story and a lot of lovable characters, which means it has a lot in common with The Legend of Zelda. And with it being a gacha game, it happens to love collabs. So far we've gotten 2 Fire Emblem events, a Mega Man event for some reason, and a Monster Hunter event. It's clear that Nintendo doesn't mind lending this game its own IP, and Zelda is perfect for a crossover. With Age of Calamity on the horizon, and the 2nd anniversary of Dragalia happening approximately now, I think it's the perfect time for it. So without ado, let's go into what a Zelda crossover could bring to Dragalia Lost. So before I begin, I want to clarify that most Dragalia Lost collaborations only feature 4 characters, but since this is Zelda, I figured I'd make an exception. For this event, we'll have 5 characters, starting with Link. Link is a light sword unit and appears in his champion's tunic getup from Breath of the Wild. Now, depending on how Link plays in Age of Calamity, I could see 2 different movesets for him. To start, if he can use every Sheikah rune ability, then his skills would be a remote bomb toss and a stasis attack. Remote bomb is pretty untraditional as far as Dragalia Lost gameplay goes, because upon building up enough CP to use the ability, Link tosses out a bomb, which can be activated by pressing the button again. This is useful for exploiting weak points against bosses. Stasis allows Link to freeze the nearest opponent in time for about 5 seconds, giving allies a chance to dodge attacks or go in for a rush. However, if Link can't use runes in Age of Calamity, then his attacks would consist of the 2 most iconic Zelda items other than a sword and a shield. The boomerang, which sweeps the surrounding area, dealing a decent amount of damage to surrounding opponents, or an ancient arrow, which he'd use by vaulting into the air and then firing a powerful shot straight ahead. Link could work either way, but no matter how he plays, he'd have one unique mechanic: Flurry Rush. You see, in Breath of the Wild, when Link barely dodges an enemy attack, he enters a slow-mo state in which he can pummel opponents. The same applies to Dragalia Lost, where while fighting bosses, Link barely dodging an attack slows them down and allows him to let loose a series of blows. This may seem like a bit of a broken ability, but it'd be a nice balance to his more untraditional attacks. For his unique victory pose, Link uses some fancy swordplay before sheathing his weapon and walking away. For his adventurer's story, the focus would be on cooking with Cleo, while Luca and Randall try to get him to talk. But Link would be this event's free unit. There's still 4 more that can be summoned, and those are the Divine Champions. Let's start with, in my opinion, the coolest champion, Urbosa. Urbosa is, like Link, a light sword unit. Don't worry, that's not a trend for this event, and Urbosa plays very differently from Link. Where Link's skills focus on utilizing his unorthodox tools to the fullest, Urbosa is a straight-up rushdown character. Urbosa's skill 1, Urbosa's Fury, has her snapping her fingers, sending lightning arcing down from the sky at the strongest enemy on screen. This causes temporary paralysis and deals a ton of damage, but Urbosa can only use it 3 times per game. In addition, her skill 2 is a dash forward with her shield, leading to a jumping high slash from her sword. That's not a reference to anything in particular, but it feels in character and I like it for her. I don't really have any concrete ideas for what her adventurer story could be, but I think having something with Marishiten and them relating over being warrior leaders could be really cool. For her victory pose, she'd take this sassy stance that she takes in one of the cutscenes in the Champion's Ballad. Now for our next summonable unit, Rivali. Rivali is, unsurprisingly, a wind bow unit. For his skill 1, he uses Rivali's Gale, which works a little bit differently than it does in Breath of the Wild. Instead of granting you an altitude boost, it just increases the agility of all of your allies. This is a massive stat boost, so like Urbosa's Fury, it can only be used 3 times per game. For his skill 2, Rivali soars into the air, notches 3 bomb arrows, and fires them all at once, creating a horizontal hitbox that deals damage to every enemy it hits. For Rivali's adventurer story, it would start with him looking around the Halidom for people to test his archery skills against, but it would evolve into a deep dive into his competitive nature when he eventually loses to Luca. For his victory pose, he'd take a similar stance to the one he takes in this cutscene in Breath of the Wild, where he lands and then just stands nonchalantly. Why does he care? He's Rivali. Up next is Breath of the Wild's Team Mom character, Mipha. Mipha would be a water trident unit, and would mostly provide support to other players. For her skill 1, Mipha's Grace, Mipha can restore a reasonable amount of any character's health. Combined with the 3 uses roll, that may not sound great, but Mipha can actually stack that effect past the 100% mark, creating essentially a damage sponge out of any of her allies if she uses all 3 of them in rapid succession. For her skill 2, she uses this attack from the Age of Calamity trailer, where she creates a spiral of water to stab her trident into her opponents from upwards. For her adventurer story, there's a lot that you could do, but personally I think it would be really cool if she got to have a dynamic with Cerise, where they both just chat and discuss how having little brothers that are gremlins can be interesting. For her unique victory pose, something that highlights her shy nature would be nice. Maybe how she tenses up and looks down in this cutscene from the Champion's Ballad. And lastly, there's Daruk. In Breath of the Wild, he wields a greatsword, but for the sake of Dragalia's gameplay, we'll make him a fire axe unit. It's more fitting to his character anyway. For Daruk's skill 1, Daruk's protection, he forms a protective barrier around everybody in the party, which essentially grants them a free reflection of an attack. That might be broken, but again, he can only use it 3 times, and if that's still too good, maybe it deals decreased damage, I'm not sure. For his skill 2, Daruk would curl into a ball, roll across the screen in a straight line, and slam down his signature weapon, the Boulder Breaker. That's not so much a thing Daruk does as a thing Gorons do, but it's still pretty fitting to his character. For his adventurer story, Daruk would have some friendly competition with Ranzel, eventually climaxing with Ranzel trying to eat a rock fillet. It's more lighthearted than most, but I think it could be pretty fun. For his victory pose, Daruk performs this animation from the Age of Calamity trailer. I think it's a great showcase of his personality. And that's all I have to say about that. For now, of course. This was actually planned to be a much longer video going into the event's story and some extra weapons that you could obtain, but I wanted to get this out around the same time as the Dragalia Digest so that if Zelda content was announced, it didn't look like I was copying it, and I did not make that benchmark, so I had to cut it in half. That just happens sometimes. If Zelda content does end up happening, I may not make part 2 if it doesn't for a while. I may, I'm not really sure, I'm just happy to have this video out. I really hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please consider leaving a like or subscribing to the channel. It really does help out a lot. My self-esteem, that is. And if you'd like to, follow me on Twitter at Dante4Smash, and I will see you all in the next video. Goodbye.